Now we're joined by another unbelievable businessman, Jim Tisch. When you read Jim Tisch's bio, you cannot understand how he could possibly do half the things that he does. He is the head of Lowe's Corporation and is involved with so many nonprofits. Lowe's is profitable, isn't it, Jim? Okay. Just want to make sure I wasn't going in the wrong direction. He's also been the chair of UJA New York, the chair of the Conference of Presidents, and I was honored to be a member of the Board of Governors of the Jewish Agency when Jim was the chair of that organization. The Tisch family is known far and wide for the great deeds they performed. I don't know if you know, I knew your father. I used to give him advice. He didn't follow it, but what the heck. I give you Jim Tisch.
Thank you very much. I am honored, and indeed, I'm thrilled to be here tonight to present this award, the Mortimer Zuckerman Award for Outstanding Journalism, to Professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz is an extraordinary law professor. He became the youngest full professor of law at the Harvard Law School at the ripe age of 28 in 1967. He is known as an eminent scholar of United States constitutional and criminal law and is a leading defender of every person's civil liberties. He is also, and very importantly, an unflinching and outspoken defender of the reputation and honor of the Jewish people and the State of Israel. I would guess that most of the individuals here this evening know that Professor Dershowitz is a liberal Democrat. And most of us also know and deeply appreciate the fact that he has not hesitated one iota to challenge any person, including other liberals, when he feels they have abandoned or attacked the cause of Israel. Whether in the pages of the Boston Globe or the Huffington Post or the Wall Street Journal or on air at Fox News, CNN, or MSNBC, his voice can be heard coming to Israel's defense, making its case, arguing tirelessly for the country's right to defend itself, and most importantly, for its right to exist. Professor Dershowitz is a passionate and prolific advocate for Israel and Jews. Out of some 24 books that he's written, half a dozen have concerned Israel and the challenges it faces, including his bestseller, The Case for Israel. He takes on the Jewish people's enemies and critics, from Hamas to Norman Finkelstein to Noam Chomsky. He is a tireless campaigner against the BDS movement, exposing its anti-Semitic agenda. Professor Dershowitz is at the forefront of pro-Israel activism, where he has been for years. And he is truly passionate to his core about Israel, Zionism, and the Jewish people. These two traits, the activism and the passion, combined with a good professor's intelligence, eloquence, and persuasive written and spoken words, make him one of the most consequential people in the fight for Israel and against anti-Semitism and BDS. He is our not-so-secret weapon in these battles, and without Professor Dershowitz as our advocate and defender, we Jews would be dramatically less well off in these important battles. Professor Alan Dershowitz has performed and is performing a vital service for Israel and for Jews. He is truly our shomer, our guardian. We are all in his debt. And so it is my great pleasure, privilege, and honor to present to him the ZOA's Mortimer Zuckerman Award in recognition of his outstanding life's work in defending Jews and Israel.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Wow. That's beautiful. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yes. 1 second.
Okay.
1 second. We're going to do something here.
Okay.
This is not on the script.
Do I have to blow the shofar?
No, I am.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for giving me an award in the name of Mort Zuckerman, who I have admired and loved for so many years. We graduated law school the same year. We've been fighting battles together for the last 50 or so years. And for me to receive an honor in his name is tremendously useful for me, and I feel very strongly about it, and I really appreciate it. And I will personally convey my best wishes to Mort when I see him and talk to him. Also, to receive the award from Jim Tisch is, to me, a great honor, too. Jim and his family have done so much for Israel and the Jewish people. I only want to comment on one member of his family, and that is his wonderful daughter, Jessie, who was one of my best students at Harvard Law School. She sat in the front row of the class, had her hand up on the first day, and she was so good in class, I hired her to be my research assistant, and she helped me write a book on the Constitution and on the Fifth Amendment. I also remember your dad very well, and I remember telling him the following story, and he got a big kick out of it. One day I was a visiting professor at NYU, and a student said he wanted to meet me for coffee, and I said, "Where do you want to meet?" He said, "I want to meet on the lounge and the top floor of the Tisch building. We call it Tisch Above." And he hadn't heard that, but apparently it's commonly known at NYU as Tisch Above. So thank you so much. I actually want to spend my time on a very serious problem that I think the Jewish community in the state of Israel now faces. I want to talk about a global trend toward extremism on both sides of the political spectrum. I think that the left in Europe and in the United States is moving more left, and the right is moving more right. We see in Europe countries like Poland, Hungary, Austria, Slovakia, Greece, France, all moving to the hard right, many toward the almost fascist right. We see in England the Labour Party, a great party, moving to the hard left. We see the Democratic National Committee moving today to the left, and that is a serious concern that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And we see universities moving to the hard left. You cannot have a serious, nuanced conversation today at major universities about Israel. It's very, very difficult. And I think these trends are troubling. There is a difference within the hard right in Europe. There are two groups of hard rights, and this is very important for us in America to understand. There are the hard right that are virulently anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. That is Greece, which has the Golden Dawn Party, Hungary, which has turned very, very anti-Semitic and very anti-Israel. In America, we saw that with Pat Buchanan, and to the credit of American conservatives, centrist conservatives, they marginalized Pat Buchanan, and the conservative movement essentially said there is no room for anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism within the conservative movement. The liberals have a lot to learn from that lesson, and I'm going to hope to teach it to them. But there is an equally disturbing trend that you might not be as happy to hear about, and that is the anti-Muslim and often bigoted extreme right that is pro-Jewish and pro-Zionist. Marine Le Pen learned an important lesson. Her father was an anti-Semite. Her father was a genuine fascist. But she learned from history. She saw what a terrible mistake the Nazis made by turning against the Jews. Had they not turned against the Jews, had Einstein remained in Germany, who knows what the result of the Second World War would have been. So people like Marine Le Pen decided they would become pro-Israel, pro-Jewish, but very strongly anti-Muslim and very strongly anti-civil liberties and civil rights. One could make the same argument, and I know it's disputed and controversial, about Geert Wilders in Holland, who has embraced the Jews and embraced Israel while making some disturbing claims about other groups. In Poland, the same thing is happening. The Polish government is very pro-Jewish in most respects and pro-Israel in some respects, but it's also turned very nationalistic and extremist on the right. Now, Israel and Jews historically have always thrived at the center. We have always suffered between the extremes of right and left, between the black and the red, the black of fascism and the red of communism. In the 1930s, many Jews were seduced by communism. One can understand it. There was fascism in the air, communism was the antidote to fascism, and too many Jews were seduced by communism only to be stabbed in the back by Stalin and Trotsky and many others. I'm a little worried today that there are Jews in many parts of the world that are being seduced by the hard right. We must not become complicit in bigotry, whether it is from the right or the left. And that is a very important point. And it's hard, sometimes hard to turn against your allies. It was very difficult for me to come out strongly against Black Lives Matter, because for me, Black Lives matter, and they matter very much. I've devoted my life to civil rights and civil liberties. I went down south in the 1960s. I've been in the forefront of fighting against police abuses that often target African American men. But as soon as I saw that Black Lives Matter put in their platform an accusation against only one country, the nation-state of the Jewish people, and accused them of genocide and being an apartheid country, I totally severed all relations with Black Lives Matter and condemned them and told them that while I support their cause, I will never become complicit with any organization that expresses bigotry against any people. And so they have a choice now. They can rescind their anti-Israel, they can rescind their anti-Zionist, and I think anti-Semitic program, or they will lose the support of many Jewish supporters. The challenge that many Jewish kids have on college campuses today is something called intersectionality, where many of these groups, gay rights groups, environmental groups, say to them, you can't become a liberal, a progressive, you can't join our group unless you're prepared to renounce Israel, because Israel is part of the intersectionalist oppression that centers on Zionism, capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, and Jews are put to a very, very hard choice. But I think that being pro-Israel can never serve as an excuse for bigotry against any other group. And we must be as stalwart in condemning bigotry among our friends as we are in condemning bigotry among our enemies. And that applies to the right and to the left equally. Now, here I'm going to make a controversial statement, and I am not politically correct. Politically correct is defined often as saying to an audience what you think they want to hear. And so I'm going to say something that you may not want to hear. I think the ZOA is a great, great organization that you're going to want to hear. But it must be a home to all Zionists, not just right-wing Zionists. It must be a home in which Herzl and Brandeis would be as comfortable as Jabotinsky, in which Ben-Gurion would be as comfortable as Begin, in which Herzog would be as comfortable as Netanyahu. I don't ever want to see the ZOA, and I'm not suggesting this is happening. This is a caution. I don't ever want to see it become the mirror image opposite of J Street, because that causes tremendous division within the Zionist community. I think what we have to do is focus on consensus issues, issues that are consensus issues within the mainstream of Israel and among most American Zionists. Let me give you a list of a couple of them. The Iran deal. There is no disagreement within Israel about how terrible the Iran deal was. And we must stand in opposition, particularly to the sunset provision of the Iran deal. And I've just written an op-ed to the new president-elect of the United States in which I say, Mr. President-elect, don't tear up the Iran deal, enforce every single word of it. What do I mean by that? The Iran deal itself does not allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons within 8, 10, or 12 years. It just allows them to develop centrifuges and other things which would enable them to develop nuclear weapons. But the deal itself begins in the prologue with the following statement, and I quote it word for word. Iran reaffirms that it will never, under any circumstances, seek to develop or obtain or secure nuclear weapons. It must become the policy of the United States, announced by the President and supported by Congress, that that is an integral part of the deal, that Iran will never, ever, under any circumstances, be allowed to develop nuclear weapons. All options are on the table, and the United States Congress must authorize the President of the United States now to take military action in the event that Iran ever, under any circumstances, seeks to develop nuclear weapons. That is a consensus issue that all American Zionists, all Israeli Zionists can agree. We can all agree to the obnoxious nature, the anti-Semitic nature of the BDS movement, and that the BDS movement is not designed to end any occupations or settlements. It's designed to end the state of Israel. We can all agree that the Security Council resolution that the President of the United States has implicitly threatened not to veto, that was referred to by Mort, would be a horrible, horrible decision. And it would be a horrible decision from my liberal perspective, because if the UN gets involved in the peace process, if the Security Council gets involved in the peace process, it sends a message to the Palestinians that they need not compromise or negotiate. It sends a message to them that they can get a state through the United Nations, through the International Criminal Court, through the BDS movement, and they don't have to come to the bargaining table. So it is antithetical to peace. How dare a lame duck president of the United States try to change 30 years of American foreign policy without any political accountability or any checks and balances? A president should not be able to take that action in the lame duck period of his presidency. We all agree that Israel must be defended against terrorism, rockets, and tunnels. They must be given support for their Iron Dome system, and that has to become a consensus issue. And finally, I think we all can agree that we must fight anti-Semitism from the right or from the left. Those are issues we can be united about. They're enough to keep us busy forever. Why do we have to get into issues that divide the Jewish community, that divide the Israeli community? It's both a tactical error, I think, and it hurts the unity of the Jewish people. Israel must always become and remain a bipartisan issue. We should never, ever have a presidential election which is a referendum on Israel. Why? Because we could lose. Let's remember in the clapping for Donald Trump that we heard here today that this was a tie election, that one person won the electoral, one person won the popular vote. 150,000 votes reallocated differently in Pennsylvania and Florida would have produced a different electoral college result. That's a fact. You may not like it, but I tell the truth even when I'm booed. And if you want to dispute that fact, show me the evidence. And the one thing we cannot accept, The one thing we cannot accept is leaving Israel's fate in the hands of a roulette wheel election system. We must always make sure that both parties and candidates for both parties support Israel, so that whoever wins the election will be pro-Israel, and we will not be in a situation where if your party loses the election, it will be bad for Israel. There are countries in Europe where every election is a referendum on Israel. In Spain, when the socialists win, Israel loses. When the conservatives win, Israel wins. In Norway, the same thing is true. Can you imagine what would happen to Israel if the Labour Party in England were ever to win an election? We must never allow that situation to occur in the United States. The Zionist Association of America should not take sides on Israeli domestic politics or on American domestic politics. I will fight to keep the Democratic Party pro-Israel. It won't be easy, and it won't be any easier if Keith Ellison is appointed the head of the DNC, and I will fight against that, just as I would expect conservatives and Republicans to fight against the appointment of any anti-Israel people to any Republican administration. I will fight to keep campus liberals pro-Israel, and it won't be easy. Why am I going to have that fight? Because they are our future leaders, and we cannot ignore them. And you cannot make it harder to win the battle for the minds and souls of college and university students. I will continue to make the liberal case for Israel while you make the conservative case for Israel. I will continue to make the case within the Democratic Party while many of you continue to make it within the Republican Party. In the end, you ask me, am I an optimist or am I a pessimist? It depends on the definition. In Israel, a pessimist is someone who says things are so bad they can't possibly get worse. And an optimist is one who says, yes, they can. I am not an optimist in the Israeli sense. I am an optimist in the sense that I believe in the goodness of the American people. I believe in the strength of American democracy. I believe in diversity. I believe that truth will prevail ultimately. I believe in Martin Luther King's statement that justice often bends, but the arc of history and the arc of justice bends it toward truth. So I will continue to fight and make the case for Israel on every campus, everywhere I can, and I thank you for making the case for Israel. Let's work together and not separately.